phone number on speed dial if you want to hassle me, but you're going to immediately back down. He did. But not everybody can be as persuasive as me. My sister, one time at an apartment she managed, they came in and they said, we don't approve units with orange carpet. So most of the complex here, you put new carpet in, so you can put new carpet in here before we'll approve it. Of course she did, but that's what landlords do. We cave in sometimes when, I don't care if we cave in. What I care about is they should never put us in that situation. They should never violate their own rules or abuse their position of authority to advocate for tenants. Now, I don't care if they treat tenants like customers, but they need to remember that the federal housing subsidy program has two customers. Who are they? Landlords and tenants. So treat us like just as big of a customer and just as important of a customer as you treat the tenants. Unfortunately, housing authorities think their job is to advocate for the tenants, and it's not. Okay, one more question, then let's move on. In the back corner.
Is this only Section 8 or would it apply to any kind of assistance program?
The legislation would apply to any kind of assistance program. But one of the things I didn't tell you is I need your stories. Those of you that have been hassled by housing authorities, I need you to email me, I need you to write me, I need you to let me know that West Valley Housing Authority is great, but this one's terrible. Davis County did this horrible thing to me. I need to know because every quarter we go in now and we see which housing authorities are breaking the rules, and we say, we want Davis County to fix this. Would everybody else in this room please help us? And everybody else says, come on, man, get your act together. And so that's how we win, is you tell us what the problems are so we can go after them. Jolene, real quickly. Of course you can say no, but then it's November, you're going to be empty 2 months. Some of us, you know, we're not required. We're not required, but we shouldn't be put in that situation. Yes?
Where do you get these rules that really regulate on housing? Can you
what are their rules?
Like that?
You know, I'm sure they wish they could just make them up as they go along. In fact, they do a lot of times. But no, they're actually in writing. Each agency has their rules, but HUD has standards. HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, has a standard for the program, and housing authorities shouldn't be exceeding those standards. Okay? Yes?
What if after a resident's been in a unit for a year?
Yeah.
It comes up for the annual inspection, doesn't pass the inspection.
Yeah.
You just ask the resident to leave?
You can. And why do most landlords not ask the resident to leave? Because it's $4,000 on average to get a new tenant. It's a pain in the butt to have somebody move out and do all the work and get somebody in. So there is tremendous leverage that the housing authority has that they can, frankly, abuse and inappropriately get you to do upgrades. And you know what? I think that we should have nice places. I think that you should take good care of your tenants. But you've got to make sure that you're not letting government inappropriately leverage you. All right, next thing. We dodged this bullet, but about the first week of the session, a legislator called me and we went into his office and he said, I have heard that landlords are collecting Social Security numbers on minors, and I want to run legislation to stop that. And we said, I don't think you need to run legislation to stop it because there's really no reason to. We don't do background checks on minors, and we can go remind landlords not to do it. If there's a particular landlord that's a problem, and he told us the one he thought was a problem, and we went and said, you know, don't do this, and they said, no, we don't do that. There must be a misunderstanding, or somebody must have misunderstood something. And so this is an example of an issue, instead of having legislation, that we were able to explain and promise to do education on. Now, one other thing. Social Security numbers and private information like background checks should be private, don't you think? Don't leave it out where anybody can see it. Always have it in locked, secure filing cabinets or in encrypted electronic formats. Don't leave that around, because if someone broke into your office and stole that, they could steal these poor people's identities, and you can't allow that to happen. So just this year, make sure that going forward, you are extra careful with tenants' information, and we can tell this legislature that we're educating people. You don't need to run legislation. Yeah?
So how long should you keep past applications
Oh, this is a great question. How long do I keep past stuff? Okay. What is the statute of limitations on fair housing? How many years after I do something can they go after me? 3 years. So if it's not somebody who owes me money, I keep everything for at least 3 years to protect myself from what? Fair housing. And some of you say, Paul, what do you mean protect myself from fair housing? Well, I keep everybody who's ever applied. I keep everybody's background checks I've ever denied, so that if somebody comes to me and says, you hate purple people, why would you say that? Because you don't have any as renters. Then I can go back through and say, look, I never had a purple person apply, or I did have one apply, but unfortunately, their credit was bad, or I didn't deny that person because they were purple. I denied them for. Do you see what I want? I want proof that I treat everybody fairly and that I follow my policies. Does that make sense? So 3 years on people who don't owe you money. People who owe you money, what's the statute of limitations? So keep it 6 years. Okay, yes?
Can you keep it electronically, or if it's a hard copy?
Sure, keep it electronically. Guys, that's the way of the world now. You know, most people, doctors' offices have hardly anything paper anymore. It's all electronic, and landlords of the future are going to have it electronic. Again, just make sure it's secure, that it can't be hacked, that it has the proper security and that kind of thing. But yeah, if you want to get rid of those, how many of you have these filing boxes from 1970, you know, like my dad does in the top of his closet? We could scan those all in, and we could throw that away, and you could store it on a little junk drive that big. Or you can store it on the cloud. You can store it online now. You know, it's just a different world. Okay, any other questions on this issue? Okay, turn the page. We're almost done. I know it's getting hot in here. I apologize. I'm going to take 10 more minutes, and then we're going to be done. The anti-discrimination bills this year, the legislature decided just to not do anything about, so there was no action there. But can I remind you something? While the Apartment Association has not generally supported adding new protected classes, we definitely don't support discriminating against people for non-business reasons. So the most common protected class that people want to add is sexual orientation, gender identity. We say as an industry, we don't discriminate against people because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. We're not necessarily in favor of new laws to make it so that people can sue more, but we just remind you, judge people on their ability to be a good tenant. The 4 things you look for are, do they pay on time? Do they commit crime? Do they damage the apartment? And do they bother the neighbors? Okay? And I don't mean, you know, do neighbors not like them? I mean, do they do things legitimately? They're a public nuisance to the neighborhoods. If the answer to all of those is acceptable, you should rent to them whether they're black or white or tall or short or gay or straight or on and on. Does that make sense? So that has always been the Apartment Association's position. Is just we don't need new laws, but we also don't discriminate against people.
What if they have bad credit, or one of them has?
Well, wait a second. I don't discriminate against people against non-business reasons. Business reasons, legitimate risk reasons, are bad credit, criminal history, smoking, previous evictions, bad references, those kind of things, income, those kind of things. Always legitimate to deny people on those issues. Okay, real quickly, open up this packet, or hold it up. You don't need to open it up. This is a sample rental criteria, okay? And many of you have seen these before. The Apartment Association for years has said you should not measure tenants against each other. You should measure them against what? A universal standard, okay? A consistent standard. So everybody gets judged fairly. You can actually hand this to a tenant when they were interested and they can read it. A lot of times tenants say, thank you, on second thought, I left my pen in the car, I'll be right back. They opt out on their own, don't they? It's great. They don't waste your time, but they say, I don't like the carpet, I'm going somewhere else. Great, okay? That's wonderful. But can I remind you why it's better if you have 3 people on a Saturday morning that want your place? It's better to have one of these and to judge them individually one at a time against these standards than all 3 of them judge against each other. Let's say you have applicant 1, applicant 2, applicant 3. You go to look at applicant 1 and you say, yeah, she'd have probably been okay. Let me look at applicant 2. And applicant 2 is actually a little bit better. And you go, oh, this guy's better, but And you go to applicant 3 and you say, wow, dream applicant, just got into the University of Utah medical program, it's going to be there 4 years, has 4 jobs and goes to school full time, will not be doing any wear and tear on the apartment, you know, what sounds like my ideal tenant, just one person, so I'm going to say yes to him. And then now you got to go deny the other 2. How many of you would go to Maria number 1 and say, Maria, I just want you to know, I might have rented to a Hispanic had not a more qualified white guy come along. No, you would never say that, and so you can't have a process that does that. Does that make sense? We can't just unilaterally pick, oh, I like this person better than the other. It's got to be on a legitimate, consistent, and fair criteria. And would you go to number 2 and say, listen, I like families and all, but your kids scare me, and so luckily I've got somebody who doesn't have kids, and I think that's a better risk. You would never do that because you know it's discriminatory. That's why you can't judge 1, 2, or 3 against each other. You've got to judge them consistently against the standard. Okay? So let's go through the standards here. Usually you say we judge people 1 at a time on these standards on a first come, first served basis. And you would say we charge an application fee. What for? You're going to do a background check. Do you want to pay for it? No, you want the applicant to pay for it. Identification. Why do you want a photo ID? Identity theft is rampant in applications. They apply as somebody else and you approve them, and you shouldn't have. Okay, employment. We want to make sure people have steady income. Okay, I'm not saying everybody has to be employed, but we got to have some way to reassure us that they're going to be able to pay next month and next month and next month, right? Income. Most landlords want people who can pay the rent and eat, don't you think? And put gas in their car, and pay their taxes, you know what I'm saying, and go to a movie once in a while. And so you wouldn't rent a $1,000 place to somebody who only makes $1,100, would you? Most landlords say the best standard is that 1/3 of your income goes to housing. So you would need a $3,000 income to rent a $1,000 place. Okay? Rental history, we like it when they've had good rental history because the best indicator of future performance is what? Past performance. So if their last landlord is not pleased, then you might not want to rent to them. Credit history, guys, none of our credit is perfect, although some of us are pretty close. You know, there's a lot of people in this room that your whole life very seriously made sure you paid your bills and on time and all of that stuff, and good for you. But there are some of you in this room that occasionally have had issues, and we shouldn't hold that against you forever. However, there are 4 very, very risky things with a renter that I might not want to ignore. How about a foreclosure, an eviction, a repossession, or a recent bankruptcy? Those all show that people use things without paying for it, right? And are we in the prepaid business? Yeah, people prepay their rent. We don't let them use it and then pay us later. And so you might want to consider those things. And if they're behind on a bunch of other stuff, one of my fears is, oh, they make a lot of money, they're lovely people, but they owe IRS a bunch of money, they owe their last landlord a bunch of money. What's going to happen to this wonderful income? It's going to be garnished. Or the IRS is just going to show up and garnish their whole bank account. And so guys, you got to understand that if you rent to risky people that have other people in line already to go after them, pretty soon you're going to be at the end of the line, not at the front of the line.
Quick question.
Julie.
What about student loans?
Okay, student loans, I don't know that they're that risky. Okay?
Even though they have a fair amount, I mean, that they're supposed to start paying.
Student loans to me would be like medical collections. Do I love that people can't pay their medical bills? No, but I understand that it's just, there's a segment of our society that sometimes can't. If they have ignored some medical bills, but always paid their rent, always paid their car payment, and kept their utilities on, what I can say at least is that they keep their priorities straight, right? And so I would lump student loans kind of in that category. If they're paying their car payment and their rent and keeping the utilities on, but they're getting a little behind on their student loans, at least they have their priorities straight. And most of the time, there are some limited cases, but most of the time the government doesn't garnish people's wages to get student loans, especially the Obama administration. I mean, they're just giving away student loan money like crazy and forgiveness, and it's a great time to be a student, okay? Yeah.
I noticed in this credit history, it doesn't have a credit score amount.
Well, it does. So we're going to look next at this credit history, but let me finish criminal history. Criminal history, why would I care? Do I have to ask? Yeah, we don't want sex offenders. We don't want violent criminals. We don't want arsonists in our apartments, okay? And so it is legitimate for us to say, listen, if you have a history of doing illegal, inappropriate things, I don't want you here. Okay, nothing personal, but frankly, I don't want the risk. So it's perfectly legitimate to set standards, and your standards can be, A, no criminal history ever. Is that fine? Sure. Your standards can also be, it has to be older than a certain number of years, and it can't be too serious. I mean, let me give you an example. If somebody was a sex offender in their 20s, and they're in their 40s, most landlords would still not touch them. Am I right? Okay? But if somebody smoked a little dope and was arrested for, you know, a little bit of marijuana in college, and 25 years later, would most of us care? No. So it really does depend on the length and severity of the crime. Yeah.
Are other states making it so that landlords can't reject somebody based on criminal history alone, and are we going to be one of those states?
He's asking if other states are making criminal history a protected class, and in California they've made sexual predators a protected class in some ways. In some states, yes, the answer is yes. In Kansas City, there's a lawsuit against housing providers that says this. It says this standard that you allegedly say is fair and balanced of not allowing criminals has a disproportionately negative impact on minorities. Minorities are more likely to fail in Kansas City, apparently, according to the lawsuit, these standards than white people. Thus, it's discriminatory, and you've got to stop it. So yeah, we are worried. Hopefully, no court will ever legitimize something like that. But we're worried about it, and we're working very hard at the federal level to make sure HUD, who's kind of leaning, honestly, in that direction of supporting that Kansas City lawsuit, we want to make sure that Congress and HUD and the administration and the courts don't ever allow that really to proceed. Yeah?
So as part of your landlord program, can you turn down a sex offender?
Of course. You don't have to have any reason to turn down a sex offender. It's a legitimate reason. Sure. Yep.
As part of the Good Landlord program, are you required to turn down someone?
In some cities, their Good Landlord programs require you to turn down people. The state law says cities can't make you turn them down for longer than 4 years, but you can turn them down as long as you want. But some cities say no sex crimes, drug crimes, property crimes, or violent crimes convictions within the last 4 years, or they can't be on parole and probation. And you know, it's actually a pretty smart standard. You know where they got it from? They kind of got it from us, because most landlords already knew that in the last 4 years, if they've done it, they're 75% likely to do it again. If they're on parole or probation, 2/3 of the time they'll go where? Back to jail, and you'll have an apartment full of stuff with nobody paying rent. So those are already pretty risky. And so I don't mind cities encouraging us not to rent to them. Most of us don't do it anyway.
We had an occasion where we signed up an individual who was going to be himself and his spouse and a child. The spouse was out taking care of an ill parent. And we said, okay, now when that spouse comes back and taking care of the parent, we need you to let us know so we can run a background check on them, and you know, and get this taken care of.
Okay.
She moved in with that, and he didn't tell us, and she had she was actually in jail. So what can I do in what could
Anytime somebody moves somebody in without your permission, we survey what?
So that's the
a 3-day comply with the lease by getting them out of here, or we evict you.
Okay.
So that's how simple it is. Okay. Yes.
Can we go back to rental history for a minute?
Sure. Let's go back to rental history for a minute.
If someone's had an adverse thing happen at another rental, they're not going to tell you that they rented anywhere. They say, I've never rented before.
Yeah.
My parents.
Yeah, they're gonna lie.
One of his points is, if somebody had a bad experience with a landlord, they're not going to tell you about it. Well, I don't expect them to, but you know what? I expect you to find it. And I'm going to teach you how to in just a minute.
Right here on the credit report. The
There you go.
address they don't write down, so when you check.
Yeah, so on the back page, turn to page 21 here. You'll notice on the background check, one of the last sections is all the addresses where they've lived the past few years. So if they've lied to you and they say we've lived with mom for 5 years, you'll know it because you can cross-reference here. So yeah, that's a way that sophisticated landlords figure out where people have lived, is the background check.
But how do you know how to contact those people?
How do you know how to contact them? I don't contact them. If you lied to me on an application, you're done.
Yeah.
I'm not giving you a second chance. Yeah.
So how much does everybody check references? Because I find, especially in the bigger apartment community,
Yeah.
they don't give you a reference without a written letter.
Yeah, they just fill out the written letter and send it in. And what they mean is just copy the bottom of your application and send it in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I don't, it's somewhat related, strange. I've been having 21 units for 55 years.
Okay.
Never had to evict any.
21 units for 55 years, never done an eviction. Let's give him a round of applause.
Most of them are students.
Okay.
Okay, I now have a tenant. I'm not familiar with any of these processes.
Okay.
I now have a tenant signed for a 6 months lease. Okay. It was a con artist right from the start. Not a student, but a con artist. They paid the first month.
So is this kind of an eviction question?
Yeah, more of an eviction question. The
Let's
question is-
do this after. Let's get
Okay.
everybody else out, and then you and I can visit side, but
Okay,
afterwards. Okay, real quick. I'm trying to get you out of here. Turn to this background check. The first thing that you'll notice is it's got the name and the information. It's a real person, but we've redacted all the important stuff. Second thing you notice is there is a credit score. What is it? 518. Most of us don't consider that a good score, but can I remind you, landlords typically are better off not looking at the score. I mean, you can look at it for a general reference, but let's say all of his bad credit was medical, and he paid his rent on time and everything else on time. Would I still rent to him with a 518 credit score? You bet I would. Okay, so don't just let the credit score guide you alone. Look at everything else.
You'd
Okay?
get a cosigner though, wouldn't you?
Possibly, or a higher deposit. So let's look at this guy's credit history and look at his present status. The very first one is a repossession. Is that good news or bad news?
Bad.
Yeah, he uses things without paying for it. Not the kind of renter that I want. So we keep going down, collection, charge off. Now some of them are medical. Go to the next page. Collection. Now go down the bottom third of the page where it says report summary. How many total trade lines does he have? 12. How many are acceptable or satisfactory? 0. Really? He's 0 for 12? Probably not going to be a good risk. Okay? Now go back up to the public records. What this section is all the guy's evictions. Okay? And by the way, there are renters that have been evicted 7 times that can still find a place to rent. Why?
People don't check now.
Because landlords aren't doing this. Okay? So they're going to be the 8th eviction. Dummy. But smart landlords, I don't mean dummy, we need to teach them the right thing to do. Smart landlords do a background check and we find judgments. This guy doesn't have any evictions, but what does he have that concerns us? He has a judgment to who? Recovery services. That's child support. And if he doesn't pay again, how is child support going to be taken from him? Garnish his wages. He won't be able to pay the rent. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm not going to spend any more time on this. Turn to the next page, which is a criminal check. It's 22 and 23. First page is all the municipalities and jurisdictions we ran. The last page, this is a true story. This is a woman whose background check I ran for an apartment in Ogden, and I told her my rules up front, no felonies. It was September 5th when I did the background check. Turns out she'd been convicted so long ago that she'd forgotten. It was 2 weeks ago. She had forgotten, apparently, that she was a felon, okay? And so when I denied her and I gave her her deposit back, I said, you know, you really wasted your money and your time, and I don't know why you would do that knowing that you had felonies on there. And I'll never forget her response. She said, well, it was worth a shot. Guys, what do criminals have to do? They just have to apply it 3 or 4 places before they find somebody who doesn't do a background check, and they get in. Aren't you glad you do background checks? Okay, or I would have a druggie in that place. All right, thanks so much for coming. I'm going to take about 5 general questions, and then I'm going to let everybody go and take as many questions. I promise I'm not going to stay any later than midnight answering your questions.
Do you return an application fee if you have to reject an applicant?
By the way, let's just end right here, and we'll have individual questions from here on. So I do return an application. So the question is, do I return an application fee? So they paid $400 deposit, $50 application fee? No. The application fee was used. I just returned the refundable deposit.
And I have a question about maximum occupancy. As long as you put down in your list of rental criteria, what is your maximum occupancy? Can you choose whatever you want? Or
what do you think? Can he choose whatever maximum occupancy he wants? Or does the government guide us to how many per bedroom?
2.
Yeah. So in a studio, if it's a family, you have to allow 2. If one of them is a child. In a 2-bedroom, if any of them are children, you have to allow a total of 4.
Is that true also if you own less than 4 units?
If you own less than 4, you're not subject to fair housing. You can do whatever you want. You could say only 1 person in a 10-bedroom if you're exempt from fair housing. But if you're not, 2 per bedroom is the guideline. Yep.
I've got some feedback from some prospective tenants that they feel landlords are keeping ads on JSL and taking applications after they have an apartment rented for fees.
Yeah.
So how many is reasonable to take as a backup?
I would never use another fee until I denied the person in front. So let's just rebuild the context. 3 people are interested. 1 of them gives you a background check fee. Another guy wants to. I might take it, but I would never spend it until I say yes or no on this guy. So I would say do 1 at a time. Never do 2 at a time. Never. That's not fair to take their money if you really didn't have it open to begin with.
Except that I find that if I tell somebody I've got an application and if that one doesn't pass, you're next in line, they disappear on me. Yeah.
Well, I understand that, but she says they disappear on her if she's honest with them. I still think one of the burdens of being a good business person is we have to be honest with them. Okay. Other questions in the back, John?
And we still, if we have 3 people interested, and we still say you have to perform immediately.
Okay, they're not in line until they give me what? A completed application and the signature release to do the background check and the money. Okay? So they're not in line until I get the money.
But once they are in line, if we want a contract signed.
Oh, if you've approved a renter, if you've approved a renter on Monday, you could say, listen, I've got so many other people interested. By Tuesday at noon, you have to have signed a lease, or I'm going to drop you and go to the next guy. That's perfectly legitimate. Most of you have that rule, that once you approve someone, within 24 hours, they have to sign a contract. That's a pretty standard rule.
Bigger than 24 hours, 4 hours or something?
Sure, you can have whatever policies. There's no regulation on it whatsoever.
Yes.
Okay? All right, now one thing I want to do before we leave is I need to get copies of these reports running on the copier machine. So I'm going to go do that, turn off the video, and then anybody that has questions, hang around, I'll answer your questions. Thank you. You got an extra?